Call this meeting to order. It's the Community and Economic Development Committee. Today is Marmot Day here in Alaska. It's February 2nd, 2023. We'll do some introductions. I'm the chair, Pete Peterson.
Joey Sweet.
Kevin Cross.
And on the phone,
Christy Rivera.
Felix Rivera. And so we have a quorum. And I'll take a motion to add this report from the Anchorage Economic Revitalization and Diversification Advisory Committee. We'll add that to the agenda.
So moved.
He moved it. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, seeing no opposition, we'll add that in under new business. And with that, we'll go to unfinished business. And we have an update of AO 2021-88S. Mr. Gates has been working on that. And I think he has a little presentation for us this morning. He's going to run through that for us. Please proceed.
Yes, thank you, Superstar. I wouldn't say we have a presentation, but I can walk through this what it is. And I have to give a lot of credit to Development Services Department and Ross Nelson Gurukha's team to really draft most of this, so I had a little editing touch-ups. So I really think that I can try to walk through, but maybe we start off singers are better able to get into the nitty-gritty details of the section that we rewrote. I guess basically, should I go through the history background?
Yeah, that sounds good.
So we have every 3 years or so the Development Services and a bunch of committees reviewing our building codes and adopting pretty much doing an entire repeal and adoption of Type 23 of building codes. And that just tracks with, I guess, a system nationwide or internationally now with the International Code Council that develops these technical codes, and a lot of local jurisdictions adopt local amendments that fit, their local, I guess, geography and topography and the local conditions and so forth. And so we go through that process and we adopted Type 23 with, I guess, AO 2021-88, and on the floor at that point, but it was before the assembly, they're going through committee reviews and then coming to the assembly. We had some floor amendments. So one floor amendment made a change to this licensing requirement for our administrative code that basically would allow someone who owned a building to do their own work, electrical or plumbing or whatnot. And I'm sort of generalizing, and we've probably stated it specifically, but that was, though, cause for some concern in our Building Board of Regulation examiners and review. They wrote a letter in July saying that that amendment was, I guess, much less restrictive than the state law and our state law with building codes and public safety. Pretty much says municipalities need to follow the state requirements, or they can be more restrictive. So we can be less restrictive, and they were very concerned about some new construction, or actually remodels or additions being built, or some electrical installations being installed by persons without a license because they own the building, and that creates, I guess, a safety issue for that structure. From then on, even as it gets sold, it changes hands. So we came back, and in September, we rolled back, we had an ordinance to roll back to the language to how it existed prior to that amendment, and prior to AO 2021-88S. And then we went back to the drawing board, and the prior language, though, was actually more restrictive than state law for allowing people to do their own work. And so we wanted to redraft so that we're just at the same level as state law. and not more restrictive, because we want people to be able to do work if they can. So I guess that's that policy direction that we got from the committee here and from the building board. And so this is the result in this ordinance. And it was a complete rewrite section rather than just some tweaking, basically, because when it was written and the way the state law is structured, it was really hard to make sense of the two of them together. So we rewrote it in a better way that makes a lot more sense. So I would invite Mr. Melfinger to clarify anything so far that I've said.
Ross?
I will have a couple of, do you want me to move up, or is this fine?
I think you can probably hear him on the tape, right?
Yeah, you're fine there. If you want to
Okay. So going through this process, we did discover a pretty significant disconnect that I just want to kind of bring forward to the assembly so that you guys are aware of it, and how you go about resolving it, or is a matter of just discussion or whatever. Yeah. And that disconnect has to do with performing plumbing, mechanical, and electrical work. And this disconnect, it lives at the state level. It's not, a municipal disconnect. And the disconnect is that for mechanical and plumbing work, and a homeowner can do mechanical and plumbing work on a single family and a duplex. But when it comes to electrical work, they can only do that work on a single family and not a duplex, right? Currently, the municipality of Anchorage, we're not operating in strict accordance with the state requirement, because currently we are allowing, and we have been for decades, allowing a homeowner to do electrical work on a single family in a duplex. The state's aware of it, but they've never made a big deal out of it. So I guess it's going to be and it's this would be a kind of a confusing manner for a homeowner building their own duplex, right? They could do their own plumbing, mechanical work, but they can't do the electrical work. It's kind of a weird disconnect. And there's a couple different ways to solve it. I mean, one way to solve it would be, for consistency's sake, you could say, well, a homeowner, you can only do plumbing and mechanical work on a single family, just like you can only do electrical work on a single family. If we go that route, we would be more restrictive than the state, slightly. Potentially the other way to go would be the muni to say, you can do electrical work on a single family in a duplex, and see whether or not the state takes exception to that. Given that we've been doing it for years, right? For decades.
Mr. Cross?
Well, I will tell you, the reality of the situation is, since up to fourplexes qualify for owner-occupied loans, that currently, as it sits, owners that occupy even up to a fourplex are doing their own electrical work. They're swapping out GFCIs, they're doing basic electrical maintenance, those kind of things. They're not doing alterations or additions, but as far as electrical maintenance, that's already existing.
So electrical maintenance or repair work is a big exception. Anybody can do that, basically. It's new installation, running new circuits, new electrical wiring, that type of work.
And I think that's where we need to be real careful, because I don't think a lot of individuals that aren't licensed electricians understand, for instance, how many outlets you can put on a circuit, and I think that's an important distinction to make.
Yeah.
So how do we resolve that?
Well, so both state code and when we adopt this, it's going to be very clear that you can do maintenance. You can do repair and maintenance work, you just can't do new work.
Yeah.
So you can't.
You can replace an
rewire
outlet.
your garage, or you could rewire your garage.
No, rewiring your garage would be new work. Like, you rip all the wiring out, now putting wiring in is new work.
Okay.
You replacing a receptacle, replacing a light fixture. No, you can do that.
All right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And for that electrical work, if I could add, that's limited to an owner doing their own work only on their own dwelling unit or a family member's dwelling unit that they own. So, and the mechanical work is a little broader. It's even allowed for commercial properties and having your own employees do that work on your own commercial property, but not electrical. So there is a little disparity. I think the big reason was a public safety purpose, and this case law that the building board cited in their letter of since the 1970s kind of laid that out. And I think there's much more concern with electrical work and causing fires and so forth than there is with, well, I'm not sure why gas piping wouldn't be, but with plumbing and water and so forth, there's damage, but it's not going to burn up the whole structure as well. So I think that's just the policy reason behind the disparity or disconnect the different types of work.
And I just wanted to note that we've been joined by Ms. Dern here at 10 after 9. Good morning.
So, there's a question.
Mr. Cross.
Do you think that regarding the difference between the state regs and our MOA regs, that it's more of they're falling back on authority, giving us more authority, having jurisdiction, or do you think it's just an unwillingness to enforce?
Well, it's been in state law like it is now for a number of years. So it's just what it is, you know, until somebody comes up with an idea and says, hey, wait a minute, let's look at this and maybe we need to amend it. But sometimes they update theirs to try to stay up with current practices, I would imagine, as well, or have they? I'm not sure. Ross, what do you know about that?
Yeah, I want to be really careful, you know, speaking about the state situation, but these statutes go back decades. And I think that's, and the statutes are hard to update, right? They got to go through that very cumbersome state legislative process. So they don't get updated. And the regulations, though, I mean, the statutes are kind of more broad, but the regulations can be updated and do periodically get updated, meaning like they adopt updated plumbing codes and updated electrical codes and updated elevator codes through the regulations. But then I think the statute language is more the problematic language for them to amend to help, you know, simplify and clarify things. And that's kind of maybe what made it really challenging for us to just figure out where is the baseline in terms of us just meeting the minimum state standard and not being more restrictive than the state. And the state has, in general, over the decades, has, you know, I think they realize that the municipality has a good thorough plan review and inspection process. So they pretty much just stay out of our business, even though we're not kind of right at the exact level of a baseline maybe that they're at, historically speaking.
Mr. Cross?
No, I'm just thinking of that. You said that you try not to be more restrictive than the state, but we often are in the muni. More in certain provisions, we're more restrictive than what the state requires. So, I mean, I guess we're picking and choosing which items we say we want to be more restrictive than or less restrictive at this point. Then,
yeah, and there are actually areas where we're less restrictive than the state.
yes, which I'm a big fan of.
But it gets complicated, right?
Yeah, it does. I concur.
Yeah.
So regarding this specific, have you read the, did you have any concerns regarding the way Dean's, amendment, or AO that amends what we've done previously? Were there any specific concerns regarding the verbiage or anything put in here? Because I read through it and I thought it was very well written, but I'd like to know your thoughts.
I think this is a much improvement on current language. This is much easier to read and understand, and for us internally and for the public, I think so. It's definitely a positive move forward overall. And so, like, the only disconnect that I wanted to point out to you was that nuance concerning single-family duplex and mechanical work and electrical work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gates?
Oh, yeah. I would I think Mr. Cross asked about the state, not being willing to enforce here, and the way the state's statutes are structured is State Fire Marshal pretty much has jurisdiction over building codes, but they can grant a deferral to local jurisdictions if they have a program or system of permitting and licensing and regulating work, building code, regulated work that satisfies the state and the state fire marshal. We give it a deferral, and that's why we have our whole department and division doing this work here, and we've had that since the 70s. So the fire marshal can take it back if they think that our system is terrible, and maybe they won't take it back if we've got a little nuance here that Mr. Lovesingers mentioned. And so we do have that deferral in writing. We have a couple of times, and I think a policy we were researching for from 2012, 2013 for plan review, independent plan review program. And we looked into that deferral at that time and talked to the state fire marshal. This is a problem. No, we didn't just talk to the state fire marshal about this. And I would just mention the way this is structured, and again, I give credit to Mr. Lovesinger and his team. We had some drafts back and forth, so I had to do my hands some of the rules between, but the way we've structured it is to follow the way the state statutes are structured, just looking at mechanical work and just plumbing work separately from electrical. So we sort of organized it that way, and that tracks that better than our old section that's being repealed, which is attached to that. And that's why it's really, I think, very beneficial and will work. And it's not going to jeopardize our deferral from state fire marshal in any way that I can imagine.
All right, great. Thank you, Mr. Gates. And I was wondering, so if we just passed an ADU ordinances, how is this going to affect that? Or are they going to be treated similar to the non-occupied unit of a duplex, or where would that fall? Any idea on that?
So, kind of the way the land use regs in Title 23, the way we've looked at ADUs is a house with an ADU is still a single family home, it's not duplex. Yeah, and so basically, if you do not fall under the limitations of an ADU, you're now a duplex. You know, if you got two dwelling units in the structure and they don't meet the limitations of an ADU, it's a duplex. That's how we treat that. And the state the state has not taken exception to that. State Fire Marshal's office really doesn't start regulating until you get to fourplex and above. State Department of Labor that enforces the electrical code and the plumbing code. I think they would do oversight over duplexes and single families, maybe to some degree, I'm not sure.
Go ahead.
Dave Whitfield, Planning Department. Ross, if I could just ask a clarifying question. The most recent amendment to the ADU regulations permits ADUs attached to duplexes and multifamily residential structures or multi-residential developments. Does that change the way you look at ADUs from a permitting perspective? Historically, we've only had ADUs attached to single family. Now we're allowing it with duplex and multifamily. So.
Yeah, I actually wasn't aware of that. So that's in effect now?
It is in effect, yes. The most recently adopted amendment.
In fact, it covers all multifamily commercial.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe
So you could add an accessory dwelling unit to a commercial building?
No, you could only do it to residential, but it would be permitted in both duplexes and multifamily developments.
Mm-hmm.
So you could have an 8
I think
unit.
it's a tricky question.
You have a
Yeah.
you have a sixplex with a single car. You have a sixplex with a single car garage. You can convert that single car garage to an ADU.
Is that ADU still limited in regards to the dwelling unit, the primary dwelling unit is connected to, or is it limited in regards to the
It could be
entire
attached.
building?
It could be attached or detached. It would not be counted towards the density requirements.
But the square footage, like ADUs can only be, what, 35% or something of the primary?
40% or 1,200 square feet, but
Right.
whichever is smaller.
Or 9. I think it's 950, right?
Yeah.
Depending on how big your structure is.
It's 1,200.
Well, I think the limitation it's 950, I believe, or you can go up to
40%.
40%.
1,200 and 40%.
But
It was amended.
maximum of 1,200%, or
That's correct.
1,200 square feet,
There
sorry.
you go.
Right.
So,
I see what you're saying, yes.
Mr. Gates?
So I sort of think the real relevant inquiry is what's the principal structure, and
Right.
if it's, I think, multifamily or
Right.
fourplex. Well, the exception here doesn't get an owner of a fourplex to their own work, it's rather maybe to it, can't do your own electrical work, maybe
Yeah.
mechanical, right? So
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
talking about
for-
the exceptions from licensing.
Yeah, really, it's not
Like a
applicable, right,
duplex and
because
rather
it-
than ADU, I think that you look at that.
Yeah, in regards to what we're talking about here, like an owner being able to do work in a single family or a duplex, these things you're talking about are not detached single families or duplexes. So an owner wouldn't be able to do their own
Gotcha.
work anyway.
gotcha, okay.
Yeah.
I agree.
All right. Well, I just happened to think about that, because sometimes when you pass a change like this that affects something that you may have just recently passed, that you might have to go back and look at and see if you don't need to, change some language there as well. I just thought maybe I'd throw that out there. Hopefully didn't get into too big a can of worms on that thing.
I haven't seen one of these come in yet as a permit, so
I
I really haven't really thought about how all this shakes out.
I spoke to Dan yesterday, and he said, Dan in planning, and he said that he had had eight in-depth inquiries regarding ADUs, and they were all residential properties, nothing commercial so far. So people saying, hey, what is the code? What can we do? What does that look like? Here's my lot. What does this mean that I might be able? But they're mostly aggressive curiosities, nobody that's moved forward with it yet.
So just while we're on this ADU theme real quick, the challenging side for the building code side of the house with ADUs was, when do you need a fire separation between the ADU and the primary dwelling, and when don't you? And the residential code committee a few years ago, I think, came up with a pretty reasonable way to look at it. And it's like, if the ADU is freely communicating with the primary dwelling, then it's really functioning like a mother-in-law's apartment, and you don't need a fire separation. And so then we defined what freely communicating means, and basically it comes down to having like a door on the interior where you can freely pass between the ADU and the primary dwelling. And in that instance, we don't require a fire separation, and we do require that at least the fire smoke detectors are interconnected, such that if you detect smoke on either side, it alarms the whole system. Yeah.
Oh, so that's where the communication comes in. It's electronic communication. Okay.
Yeah.
I was just wondering exactly, yeah.
Versus if it's like a duplex and they're completely separated, you don't interconnect the smoke detectors at that point. Yeah. Because you got a 1 hour fire separation between the two dwellings.
In practical application, I would think that you would still want them connected. You would connect the fire system so you know if there's something that's going on, because since it's adjoined to your building, it's more of and it's still technically a single family. The fire separation is easily bypassed though, because what they do is they put a door in with a double deadbolt, or they put it through a corridor and it becomes a closet, quickly converted. So, although it's connected, it can be, in many instances, that can be negated rapidly. And so I think the fire protection or having so making sure there's communication between the fire systems, I think, is a wiser way to address that issue rather than calling it a separate unit with a separate detector.
I think the reality is, though, is that 99% of the time, that's the way that anyone doing an ADU is going to want to go. Is they're not going to want to have to try and build this fire separation that's going to be costly and problematic. They're just going to want to keep the smoke detectors interconnected.
And it's really easy to do with today's technologies anyway.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, you probably don't even have to physically wire it, nowadays. I mean, maybe, I don't know. I mean, the devices communicate automatically.
Well, that's another big issue, really, is everybody in their dwelling unit has to have access to their panel and their breakers, right? And a lot of times when you're putting an ADU in an existing house, you don't want to have to rewire it with a new panel for the new unit. So they're going to want the ADU and the primary dwelling to be freely communicating anyway, so you don't have to rewire the thing. There's a lot of nuance to this stuff.
Obviously. Yeah, I think this building should be called the Nuance Building. I haven't had experience in the construction industry as far as building houses and things. We build a lot of things on the farm that we didn't need to get permits for, You don't have to get an inspection when you're building a machine shed. But, in a situation where somebody's actually going to be living in it, it takes a little more detail. And so, my question about this, is the fire department updated on these changes in these codes? So if they go out to do inspections, they know what the most recent, additions or subtractions are? Or?
Oh, goodness. Whether they were updated on that ADU change or not, I don't know.
Every time we've got an ordinance that affects Title 21, we, once we have a signed version of the ordinance, we send it out to all of our agencies so that they're aware of the ordinance. We've not spoken to the fire department, but I believe we will be, if we haven't already sent it out to them, we will be sending it out to them.
Okay, all right, great, thanks. All right, fantastic. Any other items, questions, discussion on rewrite of this, Mr. Gates?
For this ordinance, it's not numbered and it hasn't been submitted. And so I guess we have some direction. I have Mr. Pearson as the sponsor for this. And I don't know if how much you wanted to make a recommendation, you could, or you could just send it forward. I think this is ready to go for the assembly.
Through the chair, as a matter of procedure, we should probably send this to the building board and let them look at it and bless it.
When does the building board meet next?
Oh, we've been living. I can't give you the exact date.
I think it's the first Thursday of each month, I think. But,
yeah, we kind of coordinate with them, schedule it, to make sure they're all going to be available, or as many as possible can be available and whatnot. We've actually got a policy in place right now that's really kind of addressing the changes that were made to code that kind of open things up. So I don't see like a real crucial timeline in the sense that, this thing needs to go through on this specific date or anything. So, it's the assembly's call, obviously.
Well, I'm thinking we might try to get this changed so it'd be, people could use it this building season. Is that what you were thinking, Mr. Cross?
Yeah, that's one thing, Dean, if you want to add me as a co-sponsor on this one. And then, yes, I don't like to see these things languish on. We have not only this going before the building board, but we had 2022-100, which was extended out. We'll probably have to, I think that's coming up in February, either the first or second assembly meeting, which I don't believe the building board has chimed in on either, and that's independent plan review. So we have two items that the assembly is currently working on that now fall within their review. And so I don't know how many more. I know that we have a housing summit, so we're probably going to have some more stuff come up. So it would be nice to know what their schedule is and make sure some of these items are getting moved forward.
Well, if they meet on the first Thursday, that would be today. And so we might end up being on their agenda next month.
So yeah, where do we, I'll have to look and see. I don't know if their agenda is publicly.
I would imagine they have to publicize their agenda, don't they, Mandy? The building
I don't know
board?
the answer to that.
All right. Maybe I can get that before I leave.
Boards do post
So, so would you want to forward this to their attention and see if they can put it on their agenda for whenever they can fit it in, I guess. I'm not sure how backed up they are or what they have.
They're not backed up. I don't think there's anything on their slate right now. We met about 1 or 2 weeks ago, and the building board moved forward the adoption of the 2020 National Electrical Code.
Oh, okay. So that's something the assembly will be seeing.
Yeah, that should be in the hopper. Not quite sure where it's at.
All right. Well, it sounds like we have several items that are moving at this point in time. Mr. Gates?
So the building board's webpage I've just pulled up, they don't have, I don't see one on their calendar right now for a meeting, but it says they meet the first or third Thursday each month.
Well,
and
first
they
or
meet
third.
as needed. So I think if we make an inquiry with their staff, they can probably, we can ask them to get together on the third Thursday this month.
All right, well, that third Thursday, yeah, that way, we can,
And I can follow up on that, if the sponsors would like.
all right, sounds good. Ms. Durd?
I'm coming to this late, obviously I haven't been involved in a lot of the conversations up until now, but I am wondering a little bit about transformer capacity and that related to ADUs and what the load is gonna be like there, but also in the future as people might move towards electric vehicles and things along those lines. I mean, I don't need to get an answer here, but I'm wondering who I can talk to about it. I'm just interested in trying to understand more.
Yeah, I'm not prepared to talk about that, I'm sorry.
Well, that's kind of why I mentioned the rewire their garage phrase, because if people are going to be charging their vehicle, they probably are going to need to get their garages rewired because they may not have the electrical capacity, or it may be dependent on which version of the charger they get, you know, the fast one or the overnight one or whatever, you know. But
Yeah, I mean,
it's-
that would be an interesting conversation to have with the utility. I mean, it gets handled pretty easily on the individual level, you know, you hire a legitimate electrician to wire the charger into your garage. He then does the calculation as to whether or not your service is big enough to support the charger. Or if it's a commercial building, electrical engineer actually gets involved with all this. Within the building safety service area, permits and inspections are required. So it gets covered pretty well in the service area. Outside the building safety service area, it's a little more open to randomness, I guess you could say.
Yeah, that's the part that I'm interested in learning more about.
The utilities, though, things can still get added though without them being aware. It's a great question.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you. Any additional comments or questions or discussion on this unnumbered item that Mr. Cross and I are sponsoring? Not seeing any. I guess we will move down our agenda to the next item, which is a discussion about municipal marijuana license. And we had a beginning discussion about this at our meeting a couple of weeks ago. And Mr. Constant, who is bringing this idea forward, we had Mandy and he and I had a little bit of a Zoom meeting to discuss this a little bit further. And I actually mentioned at the Public Safety Committee meeting yesterday, I asked the police chief if he thought it was a good idea to go to 2-year licensing cycle, because they would reduce the number of inspections that they had to do, and he thought it was a great idea. And so at least it's on his radar a little bit that that's something that's under consideration, at least at this point. And I also asked Mr. Gates whether he thought we would need an ordinance change on this, or whether this would be something we could do by resolution. And he felt that it would definitely need to be an ordinance, because it's going to be a code change. But I'm not totally sure whether the state, the AMCO board could change their end of this by regulation, or whether the legislature would have to make a change. And maybe Mr. Gates has got some more information on that.
Yeah, since we last spoke about this, Mr. Chair, I talked to Ms. Honest, and she actually informed me she had a conversation with the AMCO director, Joan Wilson. And Ms. Wilson, who I guess would be the best person in the know as to how to change the state system, she said it requires the state statute change to go from annual to biennial licensing at the state level. So, and I recall also we do need a code change our licensing time period to biannual. Assistant Attorney Quincy Arms started a draft, and I just got to quickly got it, but I think we can get that moving. And while it would be nice, I guess, to do it at the same time concurrently with the state, because the state requires us that to change. It may take them a lot longer than it would take us to make a change. So I don't know. I think that with the ordinance change our code, you could also put forward a resolution asking the state legislature to, please look at introducing a bill to change their marijuana licensing program to biannual. But then we just have to wait for them to do that at the state legislative level.
Well, and the situation as far as being challenging to find employees, as it is for both the municipality and the state and pretty much everywhere else, if we go where they could do alcohol licenses 1 year and marijuana licenses the other year, that frees up time for everyone, fewer inspections, saves money for having to pay for those inspections, so it's good for the small business as well. And but the coordination seems like that would be the heavy lift in this situation, is to try to time it to where the state and the muni were changing the code at the same time or close to the same time. So that would be one of the challenges for sure.
I guess for a sort of transition, there's a lot of questions to be discussed. And I think, I guess my understanding was one point of view was half the marijuana licenses are odd years and half even years, and then you have 2 years. But I didn't think of what you said, doing our licensing here. Well, for alcohol licenses, we don't do those, but we do special land use permits. And those are just a one-time thing, then it's permanent and runs with the land unless it's modified. So they would do an annual or biannual application for a special land use permit for alcohol. So that's not really our issue then, but the state's licenses, we do our liquor license protests, and we do those all the time. And those liquor licenses are right now biannual licenses. So but we have, 500 or something, so we're just constantly busy. Anyways.
Right. Well, and I was talking to Mandy when we were having that Zoom meeting, and our renewal process for marijuana licenses is like a 2-page application, and the state is considerably more than that. And the operators, I'm sure, would like it if the state could get down to a shorter application as well, because they're paying for someone from legal. They're having to hire an attorney to put all that together for them, and so it's just another expense for the business. And it's always, and there's it's a very low margin type of business. Yeah, the volumes are high, but the profit margins are low, and so it's challenging for the marijuana industry right now. We have the highest taxes in the nation, so it's plus the businesses are actually paying their employees decent wages, and many times more than what people that are working in legalized states outside pay, and so that it just makes it challenging for them. Let me see, what else do we have here? Can you think of anything else, Mandy, that we discussed the other day that we haven't touched on today?
So I did reach out to Jana Welton. She is planning on attending the meeting in 2 weeks and prepping some information for this topic, kind of getting information from the industry side, any kind of potential issues that she could see from them trying to navigate this process that we could maybe mitigate in advance. So she's gonna come and bring some information at the next meeting. And other than that, I think one thing, I know Mr. Constant has a very long-term goal of trying to get the alcohol one year and marijuana the other year. I do recall land use enforcement saying that they would like to try and split it up, because right now they are doing that full thing every year. And that's too much for them to be sending out inspections every year for all of them at once. And I think they would still find themselves in the same situation even if it was every other year. So they said they would like it split up to where they did about half one year and half another year, so it kind of cut their workload in half.
Well, so then you could just go look at the alcohol license and it's got the last number's an odd number or an even number. You try to
That-
do 250 a year, break it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, and I think that was their suggestion, maybe odd license numbers on odd years and
Yeah.
even license numbers on even years or something like that. So something to think about as we move through this too, and similarly, bringing in the reviewing agencies to kind of get some feedback from them, I think will be helpful, so.
And so I haven't looked up, brought up the map as to the current number of marijuana businesses in town, and I know that fluctuates because there's been some consolidation going on. And but is that, are we 60 or 70 in that range? Is that what it is right now, Mandy?
We are more than that, let me pull it up.
And we see a situation like this that's similar at state level with real estate licenses. They must renew every 2 years. And so during that renewal period of, December through end of January of the renewal years, they are inundated and they're swimming and short-staffed, but they staff up for that and carry those employees for 2 years until they have another renewal year, because it takes time to get employees. If they were to distribute or look at a way of reallocating those so you didn't have over 2,000 individuals renewing licenses within a 60-day period every 2 years, it would shift the workload a little bit more efficiently. But for whatever reason, it's the state, we don't have control over that, but I don't want us to repeat the mistakes that they make. Maybe we can learn from them and spread those out a little thinner so that we can have a staff that stays adequately busy throughout the year, as opposed to or depending on how we look at that, or biannual. We could look at what they have. I like the idea of the even numbers on even years, odd numbers on years, and that way you can spread the workload, but at the same time go to 2 year. Something they should take into consideration.
Well, that's a separate issue. I don't know if we deal, I don't know
No,
if this
I'm just
committee
saying
deals
we-
with real estate licensing here. I don't know if
it's a
that's
state.
our
but
purview.
I'm just saying, learn from that example
Oh, okay.
and apply that to the marijuana licensing.
Well, if we were to get this completed, that might be something that
Yeah.
they would see as, hey, that's a great idea, and that would help that. Yeah, I can imagine 2,000 licenses, trying to get that all done at once, that would be nuts.
On top of your regular business.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
And that's kind of where land use finds themselves, is they're going out and doing all of these inspections for marijuana industry, for marijuana establishments every year, on top of all of the numerous other inspections and site visits that they have to do. And so I think that would help cut their workload and make it more manageable for them.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I could see how they would be pretty much buried and behind with a list they're trying to get caught up on all the time. So, yeah.
And we currently have 107 active
107.
licenses.
Okay, any other discussion about the 2-year licensing of marijuana businesses idea? Not seeing any, we can go to new business and get a little bit of information about this report that Mr. Cross has forwarded to us from the AERDAC, the Anchorage Economic Revitalization Diversification Advisory Committee. Mr. Cross?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that this report, everybody had a copy of it, and maybe at a future date, we can dig into it a little bit more. Want to make sure first everybody had received it, had a chance to review it, and then we can look at, because we've got a housing summit going through and addressing. I know that I spoke briefly with Lance Wilbur. He said that many of these items they were already working on. Some of the things that they had brought to their attention, some of the things they are in the process of either resolving or had been resolved. And so one, just get it on the record, make sure that we know of its existence. Coming at it from curiosity and saying, is there anything in here that can be learned or obtained? And what are we doing to improve the service of our industry? I mean, we're all human beings, and I can tell you personally from owning businesses, nobody's perfect. But it's important to have an outside perspective and see what kind of issues, what things that we can do to be improving. And I know that we've been doing a lot of work lately. Really proud of the effort that our planning department and permitting, everybody has done. It seems to me that since I've been on the assembly, we've been making a lot of big changes rapidly. And so it gives us a chance to take a look at and make sure we're not unintentionally creating more problems, but are we moving forward in the right direction? And are we all on board? So I don't know if anybody had any particular comments or suggestions. I just did want to make sure this got in everybody's hands and know that we will be discussing it, and I'll be highlighting some points to bring forth in our housing summit that we're going to be having here. And I can't remember what the specific date is on it, but it's coming up in the immediate future.
I think it's 2 weeks, isn't it, Mandy? And by the way, if you go to page 9, it has short-term, mid-term, and long-term recommendations. And I thought that was nice that they broke it up for us like that.
Yeah.
And so, I think we should look at some of these short-term items and see if there's something that the committee could take a look at and maybe try to get something changed here before the start of season really kicks in. I'm not sure, but we could at least take a look at it.
Yeah, so just want to make sure that's on the record, make sure everybody had a chance to look at it and review it. I'd love your thoughts, concerns. Again, just curious, coming from, just looking at, does this information help us, and what can we utilize it in order to do any adjustments that are deemed necessary? So I appreciate it.
Well, and some of this I looked at and I thought, well, that's kind of a wish list thing, but it's at least something to start a discussion, and the first thing it says, starts talking about hiring a building official. Well, yeah, good luck trying to hire anyone right now. Maybe someone's out there. I guess you never know, unless you make a position and advertise it out there. But it's interesting. Anyway, anybody from the building department have any thing that comes to mind about that they would want to mention here at the committee today?
In regards to hiring a building official, historically it's been hard to hire a building official. That's not like something new.
Right.
And I believe the Bendon and Adams report that was done in 2018 kind of gets into why it's hard to hire a building official. I mean, one of the reasons is the compensation. You look at the skill set that's required, the compensation is not commensurate with the skill set. And then the next thing is they're an exec that works at the pleasure of the mayor. So good luck recruiting someone from the lower 48 to come up and accept a position like that, right? Where you can be terminated without cause.
Right, well, it might be a 3-year gig at best, right?
Or a 3-month gig, right?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Interesting.
Craig Lyon, Planning Director. I would just say, if you're doing what you're supposed to do in life, you realize there's always room for improvement. So we're just digesting this, and we're happy to work with the Assembly on things that we can do to improve the process.
Great, fantastic. Well, I think, the committee has been making some progress in some areas. I know when Mr. Weddleton left us here going on a year, about I guess 9 months ago now, he had a long list of things that were on, that he wanted to get done this year, and we managed to check a couple items off of that list so far, and that's probably why we've been meeting twice a month instead of once a month to hopefully continue to make progress on the list. It's always great to check something off your list. You feel like you're accomplishing something when you finally get around to doing that. And I think the committee has been making some progress here. Anyway, any other discussion about the introduction of this, these ideas from the AERDAC? Not seeing any. Next thing on our agenda would be audience participation. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to participate? If you're calling in and you're on mute, to unmute it's *6, I believe. Do we have anyone online, Andy, that's calling and listening in?
Can you hear me?
It's really quiet.
Identify yourself. You have 3 minutes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Continue.
Okay. I apologize. I am at home. My name is Christy Lint, and I am a member of the newly formed Anchorage Equity Advisory Committee for the Assembly, and I just wanted to pop in and see what your committee was up to and what you'd like to focus on. Our committee met on Saturday to kind of plan our year, and one of the things that we wanted to do at the outstart of getting our committee up and going was learning about all of the other committees and just let you know that we are available for any advice that you might have on equity and inclusion. Our group includes representatives from a variety of community and faith-based groups and other community perspectives. So it's a more unique committee compared to the other Assembly committees, but we are dedicated and focused on advancing equitable outcomes by advising the Assembly in planning and policy and legislative work, budgeting and programming. And we also are focused on empowering equity leaders to advise the Assembly and intentionally engage people with lived experience and of inequities when advising the Assembly to ensure that the needs and priorities of communities and the community members that are most impacted are centered around Assembly policies, budgeting, and funding and operations. And we also provide a safe and respectful forum for equity leaders to share priorities, resources, and solutions with each other, and the Assembly to respond to immediate issues and community concerns. So those are straight from our charter that we've developed, and if anyone would like a copy of our charter, they can get in touch with us through, I believe, the clerk's office. Felix might have a little bit more information on that. And again, I apologize I couldn't make it in person this morning, but thank you for letting me listen in on your meeting.
Okay, great. Thanks for the comment. Appreciate it. Anybody else want to participate? *6 to unmute. Introduce yourself. Not hearing anyone. I thought I heard someone.
I think it was just her mic.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, and as far as our agenda for the next meeting, we want to continue to have the biannual marijuana license item on there since Jana's planning to be here in 2 weeks. So we'll see what other items we have for the agenda by then as well. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
We are adjourned.